fellow human beings. Welcome to this new episode of the Pearl Dialogues. My name is Wazee, and together with Elin, I host this podcast where we explore the nature of reality through the lens of the Diamond Approach. If you are unfamiliar with this teaching, you can find more about it on yodacommunity.org. There is an intro page there that describes what this is about. But essentially, we explore the nature of reality and how to actualize our human potential. In today's episode, I have a conversation with Greg Knight, and we dive into some very interesting topics. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation / interview, where we talk about how to bring spirituality into practicality in everyday life. We talk about the shift from a more self-developmental personal growth orientation to the non-dual boundless dimensions. We also talk about body practices that are relevant for the path. Really good episode. As always, I invite you to sense yourself, to be in the present moment while listening. This is a big part of what we're offering here. One thing is to have the intellectual stimulation and the development of our mind, but also to receive the transmission energetically is a very important aspect of this podcast. If there are any terminology that we use you are unfamiliar with or don't understand, you can go to our glossary on the diamondapproach.org. The links are all in the description and the show notes. Finally, I have created a Google form where you can share some feedback on this podcast. So if you've listened to 2 or more episodes, it would be wonderful if you fill that out. And I may reach out to you and ask you if you want to have a conversation and talk some more. That's all I have to say. So much love, and enjoy. So I actually thought I would begin by reading your short bio on your website.
Okay.
So here it reads: Greg Knight is an ordained Diamond Approach teacher and certified advanced Rolfer. Greg did his undergraduate studies in philosophy and psychology at the University of Chicago and has been studying and teaching bodywork, movement education, and spiritual inquiry since the late 1980s. Greg has been practicing Rolfing since 1994 and a student of the Diamond Approach since 1996. Greg works with clients and students in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut, as well as by Skype.
Oh.
Yeah, that was a short and sweet little intro.
I'd forgotten I'd written that. It's back in the Skype days.
The Skype days.
Yeah, before Zoom.
Before Zoom.
Nice. Appreciate reading that.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, so I hear you've been in the school for many years now and also been doing Rolfing. Do you have any, how do you feel that if you could just share shortly the practice of Rolfing and potentially how Rolfing you feel has contributed to your Diamond Approach work? Do you have any?
Yeah, I can talk about that. So Rolfing is a specialized form of body therapy and movement education for addressing long-standing patterns of holding and strain in the body, and doing it in such a way to bring the whole body into better alignment with gravity, you could say. So the main part of that work is, hands-on with a client, sort of, it's somewhere fits between if someone knows what a massage therapist does and what an osteopath or a chiropractor does. Rolfing's kind of right in the middle of that. So it comes out of a lineage more of the osteopathic chiropractic world, in that it's interested in alignment of the body structure. But instead of manipulating the body to bring alignment through manipulating bones and joints, the way most, predominantly osteopaths and chiropractic does, Rolfing's about manipulating the soft tissue structures that hold those bones and joints in place.
Mm.
So the fascia, connective tissues, things like that. Um, it's an interesting story for me, because you're reading my bio, you also talked about, my academic background. So they fit into each other and actually leads into my tie into the diamond approach. So I can make a little story of it.
Yeah.
Uh, um, when I was in college, and even before college, like my last year of high school and getting into college, I was very interested in questions about how a person knows themselves, and on the one hand, and also questions about sort of psychological stress and suffering, and but particularly questions about identity and how do we even know who we are. And I was fortunate to have some professors who were wonderful and interested in those questions, and so I was going down that route, and thought I might after college go into study philosophy or psychology or something like that. At the same time, I was very interested in the body, for fun, for exercise, but also as a vehicle for exploration. It felt important to me. Felt like this is part of these questions about identity somehow are part of what's happening with the body. So at that time, I was doing things like Tai Chi and yoga and Qigong, and very serious about that. And I was looking for links between those worlds. And at some point, I came across some writings by Dr. Ida Rolf, and it just was interesting. She had this interest in the human form and body and organization of the body and health, but she also had this, you know, philosophical bent. Was interested in helping humans be better humans. Um, and it just rang a bell and sat, in my mind. And as I finished college and was thinking about what I might do next, some things that were interesting became less interesting. Or look not as what the right path for me. I thought about going to medical school too, and just different things like just didn't light up. And the Rolfing idea, I was like, maybe I should circle back to that. And actually, remembering a couple seminal professors who were really helpful with that. They're people actually well known. So if anyone's watching this, they might have heard of someone named Leon Kass, who is a renowned uh, professor of philosophy and has done a lot in ethics, um, and a gentleman named Eugene Genlin, who developed this teaching technique called focusing, and sort of experiential body-based psychotherapy work. And they were very encouraging of just my interests. And so I thought maybe this Rolfing thing's worth trying. And I went down that road, and it, became a really good vehicle for me, for my professional life, because I like the lifestyle, so to speak. I mean, it's challenging. You're working for yourself, so that's got its downsides. You're not employed. You're self-employed. So I haven't been employed by someone since I was 24, which has its own stresses. But it's also great because you're, set your own structure and work life. But I entered it in part because it was like, oh, that's a good career. The idea of working with health and bodies was nice for me, but it seemed important for something about my own conscious development. And around that same time, I was looking for a real spiritual community and home, and had found it in little ways here and there. And I was doing Rolfing for a couple of years, and a friend and mentor of mine, a Rolfer who had been probably at that point practicing for 25 years, and we'd had some work from him, and he mentored me a bit. At one point, he said, "Well, you seem like the kind of person you might like this thing. It's called the Diamond Approach." And there's a guy who's starting a new group in the area, and he wrote down his name and gave me the name of the book Essence. At that time, there weren't a lot of books out, maybe 3 or so. And I had a lot of respect for my friend and mentor. And so I got the book and really, liked the book a lot. I can't say it was like transformative, but it was like, yeah, this guy's on to something. And liked the clarity and the curiosity in it and the precision. And I went to a weekend. And that was done. I was like, yeah, this is it. And that's what's the next thing? So I'll keep going. But all along, the work with the body has been an important piece. It's not the only piece, but a really important piece. And for my own journey as a student on the path, and now also how I work as a teacher, in sessions with students and leading groups. And I also am one of the people who teach the diamond body practice. I don't know how familiar you are with that, but it's a system of movement work that we use in the school that people can use to support their journey on the path. So they're very woven together for me. Very important.
Wow, a fascinating journey, it seems like. And I'm curious about how you've observed your body transform over the years of working with it so intimately.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what comes to mind right away. A lot less tension.
Yeah.
And a lot more presence.
Yeah.
So in terms of tension, be struck by how much, there's tension that bodies have, my body had just from, life activities and repetitive activities, and so much rooted in psychological binding that who we are doesn't have a difference between, when we're angry and our teeth are clenched. That is our anger in our clenched teeth, or we're angry and our face is placid, but we're clenching in our chest or our body in some way. And so that just sort of opening that up, right?
Mm.
And then more presence, like that the body, even though I was doing a lot with the body and I was sensitive to the body, oriented to it, it's still very much in the beginning and for a long time relating to the body as an object, something that I have, something that carries me from thing to thing. And a long process of discovering the body as an expression of me. And it's the sensitive form of me that contacts the world, the physical world. Without, I wouldn't see you, right? My eyes are seeing you. My lips are making words, and I'm sensing the pleasure in my chest, and just all these elements that the body has. Mm-hmm. So waking up to the life of that, or in more and more ways. Mm-hmm. So the body itself feels more, on the one hand, more substantial, like just there, and yet much lighter at the same time. Even though I weigh more, I have more pounds on my body than I did 30 years ago. Not a lot more, but I weigh a bit more. But the lightness, there's a lightness in being. And at the same time, it's a lightness that feels substantial and dynamic.
That does make sense to me. I've had my own journey with my body, which has primarily been through yoga, which has profoundly supported my freeing up tension and so forth. So I can relate to what you're saying.
Yeah. No, we could talk about at some point or now, how different systems evoke different expressions of awakeness in the body. Right. So yoga, I was pretty serious about yoga for a long time, and other movement modalities. Think about yoga. People do yoga for lots of reasons, all good. Exercise, could be a fitness thing, could be a vanity thing, it makes my body look a certain way. Be a, a mental thing, like just more focused, more relaxed. Could be a sense of something emotional, something about connecting to spirit. But yoga itself comes out of a whole spiritual tradition, right? And that informs, even if you're whatever level you're doing it at, there's a little bit of that in it, right?
Yeah.
Versus if you were really into Tai Chi, can evolve. You could enter for all the same reasons, but that comes out of another. Hinduism is very different.
Mm.
And the soil of that was the roots of Tai Chi. And most spiritual teachings have some kind of movement work associated with them, to support that journey. And the Diamond Approach is no different. There's movement practices that we can learn. We call it the Diamond Body practice, that again have a certain benefit, for being on the path.
Yeah, the visuals that I get when you speak about these, particularly the different logoi and the different teachings and how they usually have a diamond practice or a body practice that comes with it, is I got visuals of geometry, as if each teaching has its own geometry, and when you participate in that geometry, the whole mandala of that teaching impacts you in some way, even though you might be in it for a different reason.
Yes.
Yeah.
I resonate with that. And and they can influence each other. But yes, there is a certain kind of geometry, a certain kind of organization to them that influence our particular way we, wake up, experience more of our essential nature.
For sure. For sure. Do you have any aspects or facets of the teaching of the Diamond Approach that you particularly have a curiosity about? Something that you felt that you've dived into particularly?
You mean like lately, or like over the whole time?
Yeah, even lately, or over the whole time.
Sure, I shouldn't have offered the second one because it's like so many things.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole path is interesting. I'll answer it a couple of ways. On one hand, the whole path is interesting to me.
Yeah.
And so it's dependent on where I've been at in the teaching. So in this, as as your student in the school, it's a big teaching. There's a lot in it. It's has a lot of breadth and depth, and nuance. It's as it's why we call it one of the reasons we call it Diamond Approach. It's faceted. There's a lot of facets. And so when I'm in sort of my student mode of being in the path, which is basically all the time, but particularly if I'm on a retreat, I'm receiving a teaching, that teaching is like, yeah, this is where I'm at. I'm into this. I want to know about this and experience it. And then it circles back over time. So that for sure, just over time. I'd say for myself personally, what's holding my attention most the last months, year or so or two, is what I could call integrating a view of, the colloquial term was integrating a view of non-duality, but that's, that word gets used in a lot of different ways. But what is it to live from a view of who's experiencing is not separate from anything that's being experienced? And a dimensionalness to that. Like it's not just a view. It's not just what I'm seeing. It's not just what's seen. It's not just what's thought. It's actually the literal palpable sensation that what I am is everything. And that everything is dynamic, full, and fulgent, and expresses itself in different ways. And sometimes it shifts and orientation, but there's a certain kind of freedom and delight in that and newness. I mean, I've had those experiences many times over many years, but there's something about the last year. It's about landing in it in a really long way. Like it's like something's like I need to check this out for quite a while. There's something happening here. And to challenge beliefs I didn't know I had about, what things are. And so it's been actually a source of great pleasure and support, actually. So that's what's been holding my attention lately.
Beautiful. I feel this is very relevant for what I am curious about at the moment. And I wanted to ask what or does any belief come to mind that you've had to challenge in particular that you feel has been relevant?
So yeah, relevant to what I was just talking about.
Yeah.
I would say the one that comes to me right now is the belief that the word that comes to mind is authority or ownership. That at different levels, at many levels, exposing a belief that there's someone owning this experience or responsible for this experience or not able to own it but wants to own it and is feeling afraid of not having ownership of it. Some sense of, it comes to mind, like it's like we're all kids once, right? And we're all maybe still have that in us to some degree. And that sense that someone, hands you something, like give you a cookie or something, and right then you think you own it. Like it's yours. And if someone takes that from you, it's not like you feel like someone's taken something from you. Like it feels like it's not, it feels like personal.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, that's mine. Even though someone just gave it to you, all of a sudden the ownership wraps around it. Like that sense of, no, it's mine. He took my toy. It's not like he took a toy or my cookie. He took my toy, my cookie. That sense of how quickly my wraps things. So there's some emotion present, and this is my emotion, right? There's some situation happening, and there's my relationship to that experience. There's an owning of it in some way. And maybe the ownership feels weak, like that little kid in me who had the toy taken or the cookie, and someone took it. I don't, my ownership's being threatened. I feel vulnerable in my ownership, or maybe I feel, this is mine. You can't come into my space. You're in my space. You need to back off. All those kinds of ways of sort of wrapping our experience in some way. And so that's been just seeing that in lots of different ways.
Very fascinating thread. Very fascinating thread.
And I just add, there's nothing wrong with that view.
Yeah.
In fact, it's a really important development to have that view. Like it's, when you see a kid, I don't know if you have kids, I have kids, and we've all been kids, so you've seen other people's kids. Before that stage, you're just, there's more openness and emptiness and presence, but there's less of a person, individuated yet. When a kid starts to say mine and not, we might react to it different ways, but there's a little part of us that's like, yeah, good job. It's like, it serves a purpose. It helps us kind of own our experience. We need to own our experience for a long time so we can establish ourselves in the world and how we fit in with other people and just make our way. But it's not an inherent feature of our nature. It's something we develop.
Yeah.
And we become identified with it.
Yeah.
It's good that I know that I own the car that I drive, and I don't just leave it open and the keys there and someone else takes it. Like, it makes life work. And I also know that you own that one. I'm not going to just walk in and step into it, drive away. But it's a way, it serves a sort of view of oneself that eventually over time, you don't have to force it. You start to see, that's a bit of, at one point that serves me. At another point, it's actually a barrier to some other experience of things.
How do you view the concept of accountability within that context?
Yeah. Yes, that's good. So when there's more sense of, we'll call it the myness, the owningness, may I'll pull back the lens a little bit. In the diamond approach, there are you might have come across this, that we call four big turnings in the school, right? There's four big chapters of teaching. And the first chapter, and the chapters overlap and interpenetrate, but the first chapter is a lot about discovering that what's most real about us, our inherent inner nature, and that what's most real about us is being presence. And from that, it's a great chapter, and we circle that's so super important to have that discovery. And a second chapter is recognizing that presence is everything. It's another chapter. When you're in more of that first chapter, ownership's important and accountability is important. It's part of the development of that chapter. It's like, I'm being accountable for my development. I'm accountable for my feelings. I'm accountable. And what I'm not accountable for, that's not mine. That's yours. I don't need to take that.
Yeah.
And there can be a sense of respect for myself, right? And respect for you. Sense of mutuality, sense of diversity. All that fits in there. The second chapter, the accountability is more like you could say in some ways it doesn't make sense as a concept. But not a license to do things that are from the first chapter would not be accountable. So that often happens to people. They're in the second chapter, and I don't mean it like second's better than first, but it's like they're in sort of that second phase, and there's stuff in the first phase that hasn't been processed or worked through. And like, well, I'm everything, so I can walk off with your car, or I can insult you, or why are you taking this so personal? It's all one ocean. When you have both of them there more, you're inherently kinder, you're inherently more respectful of others and yourself, because who you're relating to is you all the time. I'm not going to harm you because it's harming me. But it's not you and me is separate. I mean, it's not like there's two of us in that level. So I just know where you're at on the journey, and the journey is not linear for most of us. It's usually like kind of here for a bit, and we travel to this new solar system, then we come back to this one, and then go that. They tend to kind of influence each other.
Yeah, what comes up for me as we speak about this is the possibility of moving into the second chapter without having thoroughly integrated and developed within the first chapter. So there is some elements of if there is some elements of bypassing of certain aspects of the first chapter, then that can spill into a situation where there is some realization of the boundless dimensions of non-duality, while there are certain blind spots in the personal space that can lead to some trouble.
Beautiful. Yeah, yes, exactly right. And one of the features of the diamond approach is its focus on what does it mean to be personal, to really be a person from all these chapters. So yeah, and it's important. You might recognize, there's a blind spot here, or something that hasn't been processed or thoroughly, metabolized.
Yeah.
I can pay attention to that.
Yeah.
And bypass is a good word. We have which is different than like, some of us just might more tend towards one chapter than another just by our nature. But sometimes some of us like, I just don't want to deal with that because it's a little too it's beneath me. What we're saying, it's like I don't want to feel that yucky. That feels yucky to me. Not quite able to handle, and it's going to affect us.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so within the question of the second chapter, which is basically the boundless dimensions, the dimensions of non-duality, what was the journey of that dimension opening up for you? Was there like a shift that happened? Is there so? Can you speak more to that?
If I'm honest, I don't quite know. Actually, it's as you asked me that question, I'm remembering a short version of my history with those kinds of views. First maybe glancing at them in my 20s and was, wow, that's interesting and I want to be there, or wow, I don't get it, or whatever. Just was like a comet in the sky, just interesting.
Yeah.
And whether I idealized it or romanticized about it or whatever I thought, it wasn't long on my radar because I had I was in other areas. And now I'm remembering when I first had long teachings on this, my home, the group that I was a part of, meeting several times a year. We spent, we'd done several years in that first chapter, really profound stuff. And then we started a several year journey on the second chapter. We're calling it Second Turning. And I was, again, this is great. This is what I'm really interested in. Not the other stuff was great too. And so I was jazzed by it then. I was a bit more facile with it. So it was a bit more like I could get tastes of it. I could, experience it. But just here I'm talking about it. I could experience it. I got tastes of it. There's someone still having all those experiences. That was an ownership. Talk about the minus of it.
Yeah.
This is my experience.
Yeah.
And language sort of breaks down because it's like my still fits as a word. Like it's my experience, it's not necessarily your experience or my friend's experience or my co-worker's experience.
Yeah.
But that went on for a few years, and honestly, I think as I think about it right now, so I had those teachings for a long time, right, in a lot of different ways, and then I became a teacher in the Diamond Approach. And being a teacher, particularly, at least my experience, in these years I've been doing it, a lot of your work as a teacher is in that first chapter of people for a while.
Yeah.
Because that's where they're at. And then if you're teaching groups, and I co-lead teach some groups, the first things you're doing are that first chapter of work. So I had all that second chapter of stuff, but I was like, well, for second turning stuff. And I'm back in the first turning again. And I was like, I was just more able to, like, it just worked me in a new way. I have to teach it, to have to sit with it. And, maybe it's also being older. I started in this work when I was young. I was in my 20s. And so who knows, a lot of factors come into it.
Yeah.
But I think that really had a profound effect, being in those. I think I know, I can feel it. I can feel, you asked me earlier, how's my experience in my body changed over the years? I wouldn't have been able to name it at the beginning, but looking back, there was a very hard shell of there was a way my body was just, as though the body itself had the inner body, you could call it, was a hardness. And so things can only penetrate that so much. Didn't matter how flexible my tissues were, but something of like the innerness of the cells were just hard, like a seashell, hard. And that had changed. And so when I get those first turning teachings again, penetrated more deeply. And then it's like, oh, okay. And then I wasn't looking for next things to happen. But then as that seashells start to soften, this other view starts coming in more completely.
Mm.
There's less of a barrier,
Yeah.
you know. But it was all that work, you know, and not from the view of like, well, if I do this particular work, I'll get to that piece of work. It was more like just kind of being in it.
And all the while there is a logic to everything you're saying that is
Yeah.
for me profound, and also speaks to the potency and the intelligence of the teaching and how it works a soul. I mean, that is profound.
It's a real gift of the teaching that there's that you have people who are able to guide that, you know, help
Yeah.
guide them through it. Not that they know it, but they can just be with you and maybe have some sense of what's happening with as a teacher, or you know, that kind of thing. But also that sense of, oh, this fits in here. You know, you're in a place. This is a place. It's happening, and it can relate to the other things. Let's find out what that is for you. Let's open to that. So even when you feel lost, it's like, oh, lost? Yeah, that's here. That's part of this. Let's
Yeah.
go into that.
Great. Great. Okay, so now this beautiful question about bringing presence, bringing realization into everyday life, bringing it into spaces, situations where you're potentially in environments where people are not open in that way, maybe even resistant to it, bringing it into situations that may be quite complex. I mean, I would say certain work situations are quite complex because there are so many people that you interact with. There is an agenda, there are expectations.
Yeah.
So I would love to hear more about your perception and experience and journey with contemplating, chewing, and also bringing that into life. What have you discovered?
Yeah. There's a lot there. We have actually, there are whole retreats on that question.
Yeah,
Whole retreat, like days of exploring that question.
yeah.
Um, so some things, you know, one is there are, you know, fundamental practices that we have in the Diamond Approach. Inquiry is the primary practice, right?
Yeah.
This open-ended exploration of your experience. But a foundational practice is the sensing and looking and listening practice. And that's foundational. It's not the primary, but it's the foundation.
Mm.
You know, the primary doesn't take off without the foundation. So learning about what it really means to be actually sensing yourself, and what that means, like, you know, we often say, like, you know, if nothing else, sensing your arms and legs, like literally just aware of the sensations, not aware from them in your mind that might be happening, but in the location of your arms and legs, that the sensing is aware of itself in your arms and legs as you move through your day, as you do activities. And you'll find it's not easy, you know, to be that aware, to have part of your awareness, half, whatever the amount is, within your own experience as you're doing things. So that leads to another practice we do called life practice. And where, you know, all groups will do that, start that at some point, where you practice sensing while doing simple tasks.
Mm.
You know, and you start with really simple tasks. And the point isn't to complete the task, you know, so it's like maybe, you know, cleaning a window, right? Or straightening your room or folding your laundry. It's not paying your bills, it's not returning, like those are more complicated or mental activities. Something simple that you already do, you know, washing your dishes, but doing it less with the focus on completing the task and more on being in the sensing as you do the task. So you're bringing more presence into your everyday life.
Mm.
Those are big for bringing more of, and you could call it a embodied realization into your life.
Mm.
And back to the point of your body is the vehicle for living your realization. As long as you're alive, mean, I'm separate from what happens after you die. You're here now. The realization is going to happen through your body, the manifestation of it, the actualization of it. So it's taking the time to practice and bring that kind of sensing into our experience.
And post retreat, how have you applied that practice yourself? Can you speak to that?
Yeah. Well, first I'll just say, post retreat can sometimes be a really hard time for people. Not for everybody, but I'm speaking for myself, for years. There's the high of the retreat, the expansion, the openness of the retreat. And there can be a contraction sometimes afterwards. So just to acknowledge that, that you're not off base if that's what happens to you. So some making space for your experience after the retreat. It could be, some practical things. When the retreat's over, to leave some time at the end of the retreat to be part of the retreat experience. So one of the advantages of having a retreat you physically go to, and there are many, is that the return time is part of your transition, right? You have that travel back, right? And you're in the world a bit more. So if you're doing a retreat online or your retreat groups close to your house or whatever it is, scheduling your life, if you can, in such a way that I have some space after the retreat's done. And maybe I have to go, maybe I get home and I'm a parent. I got to get right in it with my kids when I get home. My wife's been carrying the load while I've been away, or I've got just work I got to get to, or that happens. And, maybe you plan a time, a few days later for I'm going to have some integration time there. I'll sit, I'll meditate, maybe I'll do an inquiry with a friend, something to kind of bring it forward a bit more. But that's the practical piece of the sensing practice. You finish your retreat, the thing you do the next day when you wake up is you start the day with, you're lying in bed or sitting at the edge of your bed, and you do that. We have the sensing practice that we do, from one side down the other, and bringing in listening and looking. And you just, even before you meditate another time of the day, but just starting with that, just that kind of, it's like welcoming the day in a certain way. It's like, I know some people are like coffee drinkers, like that, making the coffee in the morning is a big thing for them, or, getting their, cleaned up before the day starts, or getting their suit on. Something people do, like I'm getting a bit more here, I'm kind of waking, maybe they like to do push-ups or whatever, everyone's got their different things. Maybe it's checking email, see where I'm got to deal with.
Yeah.
This is a way to sort of like, it's a kind of kindness to ourselves. It's like the weight, the awakeness is already there, but the kind of shellness may have been kind of come back a bit. So we're sort of allowing ourselves to get back in touch with that awakeness. So, could be 10 minutes, just to give it a little time, set a timer, get up 10 minutes earlier if you have to. Yeah, just little supports make a big deal.
Yeah. Again, I feel it's very logical. I feel in your transmission, in your pearl, there is a particular kind of clarity that has this very logical, practical transmission that for me has a lot of earth in it as well. There's a fair bit of earth element that I really enjoy. So I really enjoy listening to you, and I really enjoy how your mind works and how you communicate. For me, there's a lot of clarity.
Glad, thanks, appreciate that. I'm glad it's good for you. Yeah.
It's enjoyable to listen to, and that just came up for me.
Well, you're asking, just to underline it, you're asking a question that most most of us will have in some way, but it may not get explicit. So it's just worth underlining it. That question of like, how do I live my realizations, you could say, or to kind of take even that bit of jargon out, how do I take my peak experiences and have them become more a part of my regular life? Now I have some peak experience of, I've been using the word awakeness, you call presence, that's awesome. Whether it was, just because the sun was a certain way that day and you're touched by the beauty of the sun, or you were on a retreat. How do I bring that forward, into, so it actually isn't just a thing that I remember, but actually becomes more who I am.
Would you say that you've applied the typology of the Enneagram work a lot in your life?
Some. I'm not a huge Enneagram person, but I'm capable enough.
Yeah. But primarily for your own development?
Primarily for that. And I don't tend to go to the Enneagram view when I'm thinking about working with students, for example.
Yeah.
Not, I can, if I need to, I can do it.
Yeah.
But I hold the Enneagram as extremely potent. And I remember having teachings on it and being quite moved by it.
Yeah.
I also hold it pretty lightly at the same time. And I was, in part because of my own journey with my own understanding of my own kind of type on the Enneagram. And it's moved around, I wasn't sure. I still don't pin myself in one spot. I mean, there's certainly ones I'm not likely that way and I'm more this way. Yeah. But it was so useful for me to be like, oh, I thought it was this, I thought it was that, and to really believe that and work it for a long time. And one of the teachings of the Enneagram, at least as I understand it, is that even though we have a predominant type, you might know yourself as a 3, or a 9 or whatever. We have all the types in us.
Yeah.
And to really, explore the Enneagram completely is to explore your expression of each of the types. But I also know, I'd say one thing at the Enneagram, I have, good friends, and to see how the Enneagram was so useful for them to, this explains a lot about me kind of thing. Yeah. Like it both gave them it relaxed something in them. Like, I don't have to be so hung up about this, but also gave them okay, let me go a little further about it. That's impressive, when you see that.
Are you impressed by the Enneagram itself, you mean? Or
yeah, it's impressive that people find a tool like that they can go into it with. Yeah. So yeah, that's my experience with the Enneagram. It's not a top shelf thing I use, and it's, I appreciate it though.
Good. Yeah. Beautiful. Can I ask about what you're experiencing right now when you're communicating, when you're sharing? What is it that's flowing through you? What is the substance of your experience right now?
Space, kind of spaciousness, kind of a dense space, and enjoyment, pleasure, relaxation, lots of things. For those, the dense space is the strong thing. It's like a sense of, and it's, in my body and beyond, in my physical body, but also beyond it, into the physical space in front of me. I'm sitting in front of a screen, there's 2 or 3 feet to the screen I'm looking at. There's the image of you, and I see your room behind you, and I see the window behind you, and there's trees. So it kind of extends into the visual space. And it's as though that dense, it's clear. It's a dense, clear space that feels like it's in everything, and everything's sort of the surface of it. There's just, and on a personal level, it's also like what's the next thing that's going to happen? Enjoying the conversation. You're easy to talk to.
Yeah.
So it's nice to have a conversation, nice to talk about this stuff.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that makes me. Yeah, it brings a sweetness to my heart when you say that. Um, Initially, when we started this conversation, you brought up the question of identity, and within
Yeah.
the context of what you're experiencing now, what is the sense of your identity?
I don't have one.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, I know there's a label Greg that is a name tag that I have. And I know I have roles, and speaking from this location, this current experience,
Yeah.
but well, I mean, the identity is the dense space. That's what I am,
Yeah.
but it's not exactly who's talking at the same time. So I'm not, it's sort of a puzzle to me.
Hmm.
And there'll be more exploration of that as time goes by on my own. I'm just kind of unfolding. But yeah, so what's my identity right now is, um, I know who I am in terms of my life. I know, like, the person who has a life that, I'm married to this person, I have these kids, I live in this place, I have these strengths and challenges and all these things. So I can be aware of all that. And who's living that life is not, a thing. Maybe that's a good way to put it.
Hmm.
At the moment, that's the experience. It's like more like this dynamic, fluid. I mean, to put it in spiritual lingo, it's like I am an extension of reality. Let's put it that way. That's what I am.
Hmm.
Some people say, like, you're a God finger. It's not like you're God, but you're a finger.
Hmm. Would you say that there are, and we also touched upon the question of ownership. Do you feel that
Yeah.
that apply in any way to how you're experiencing yourself in this moment?
Um, I could use the word ownership in the sense that I, quote, own this life of, like, it's my responsibility. You're talking about accountability, responsibility.
Yeah.
I'm accountable and responsible, to I'm being married. I mentioned being a parent, living in this location. So in that sense, there's that level of ownership.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Beautiful.
But nothing owns the spirit per se.
Hmm. Hmm.
But both are true. I mean, I think it's important. I just feel moved to say, when you lose something in your life, if you do, that hurts sometimes. It's like, it's not a bad thing or a sign of spiritual maturity that, like, you suffer because, someone you love dies or leaves, or,
Hmm.
or you don't get something that you really wanted, and also the delights in getting things you wanted, or having someone come into your life. All that's fine. And uh, your reality doesn't need to be reduced to something monolithic.
Can you elaborate on that? The last part.
Well, this gets into the fourth chapter.
Here we are.
uh, that um, reality, what's real, what's happening, the depth of it is so interesting, so dynamic, that it doesn't reduce itself to one thing. you can experience it that way. You can experience, and that's one way reality can show itself. This is the presence of reality. This is the total, everything is pure, substantial awareness and presence. That's it. You might just live your life that way. But that doesn't negate the possibility that it's also expressing itself at the exact same time as emptiness. It's very different than that sort of substantial awareness, and it doesn't negate other kinds of ways reality expressing and showing itself. So I think that actually speaks to the ownership piece. Like that, one of the reasons we can hold on to subtle ownership is that we believe that I'll finally get to a place and that is the end. And now I have it.
Yeah.
Even if the I has been thinned out a lot, if you got to this place, well, the I still likes it. Like, oh, I got my cookie, I got that toy.
Yeah.
Right? Just happens to be the boundless nature of reality. And it's beautiful and totally fine. But reality has more tricks up its sleeve, saying, yep, you got it. And I can show myself another way to you. That's completely feel like it. And you're like, wait a second, how can I have this? That's totally it. But there's this, and it's totally, and me. So it's not monolithic that way. It doesn't have to be just one thing.
Yeah. Well said. This is a different question. What in everyday life do you feel, what are some of the activities or habits or rhythms that you have to keep yourself healthy and your brain sharp, or to keep yourself,
some basic things they're basic because they're basic, like they're foundational. Generally try to eat sort of well, get relatively good sleep. Don't over medicate, but get health care if you need it. Take care of your health. Those are, really, gotta say that's like, gotta get those down. If you're having troubles, like start with some basic stuff. Am I eating pretty well, not being rigid about it? Am I kind of getting good rest? Do I need some sort of health care or whatever, taking care of stuff? For me, the body piece, as we talked about, has mattered a lot in terms of my own kind of waking upness. And that's not true for everybody. But for me, there's certain movement practices I like to do and exercise. And that keeps my body healthy and sharp. It also keeps my mind sharp. I like to read, and that's, just different stuff like that, staying engaged and, being exposed to the nice thing about being in a school like this is you're exposed to other people who, you realize they're really devoted to the journey and the path, and they're on it. And you find, wow, that's how you do it? That's how you stay engaged? Oh, it's like just so different. It doesn't make any sense to how that would work for you, but it works for them. And it kind of opens you up in some way.
Do you have some examples that you would be willing to share about something that surprised you?
I'm wishing I could remember the content, and if it comes forward, I'll remember it. But I remember the situation. One of the first times I felt this way, this is a long time ago, like at least 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago. And I was in an inquiry exercise with two other people and doing some sort of monologue process. And the other, maybe I'd done my piece, I don't know, and someone was doing their piece. And I just kind of dawned on me, like their way of exploring themselves is just, I just don't get it. But like, I don't get it, like they're doing it wrong. I think before that, I would have said, I don't get it and they're doing it wrong. Like that kind of shell of me, like, well, they're not doing it. It's not work. Like I project myself into them. Well, it's not, that wouldn't work for me. So obviously it can't be working. Sort of like it's sort of an ego's monolithic view. Right. And so that, I'd had that view for a while, and somehow that started to soften some, and I'm paying attention. And I don't think I'd even realized that view had softened. But the person's doing their inquiry, And I'm probably sitting there. Maybe that shell was still. I was like, well, they're not getting anywhere because it wouldn't work for them. It just had that sort of slightly subconscious, that feeling like that wouldn't work. That's not going to work, you know. And then something just kind of. I just remember the feeling coming forward in me of like, wait a second, it's maybe 10. Something's really opening in them. I can totally see it and feel it. All that stuff I'm thinking about, it can't be true because it's working. What is it about? How do they do that? You know, what's happening for them? And it's just so other, the otherness of it. You know, it reminds me, I don't know, maybe you've seen this movie. It's on, I think it's on Netflix now. It's called My Octopus Teacher. A lot of people have seen like
I've
this.
seen that one, yeah.
Very, yeah. And that sense of like being in touch with another animal, right? Who's so different. In this case, a human and an octopus. And it's like the octopus know the world and experience things. And you can't help but sort of project and imagine. People are like that, you know, like we're like our bodies are all basically relatively the same. You know, you probably have 2 arms and 2 legs, and you got a torso and a head and all that.
Yeah.
But the inner body, wow, really different. And to learn to sense and look at it and wonder like what's happening, what makes it work for them. Quite significant impact. And I think that comes for a lot of us, you know, just based on our own upbringing, where we learn like this is how it is to live in the world. You know, we are shaped a certain way.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a little looser for some. Maybe some of us have a bit more open upbringing where it's like, well, this is how we do it in our house, but you see how in their house they do it that way, right? But
Yeah.
in other, it's like in my home, it was like a certain way of functioning was really valued.
Yeah.
And that developed a certain thing, but also other ways were not as valued.
Yeah.
Right. And so you end up looking, you just can't help but have that, you know, it affects you when you're young. So that takes a while to kind of let that widen out a bit.
Interesting. Can we try something? It's called a quick fire. It's a quick
Okay.
fire repeating, no, not a quick repeating question, but a quick fire question where I quick fire a question and then you answer something.
Okay.
Whatever comes to you. Like, but there's that taste to it, huh?
Okay.
What inspires you?
Love.
What makes you angry?
Not getting what I want.
What do you love?
Oh, what do I love? Sweetness, you know, sweetness, kindness.
What do you often think about?
What do I often think about? I don't know. Got empty on that one.
How long would you like to live?
Into my 80s at least.
What is your view on the world?
My view on the world. Well, I don't know if you mean like politically or
Yeah.
my view on the world. The quick fire answer is the world is me. I mean, I'm viewing myself.
Hmm. What do you like to eat?
Ice cream. That's the first one right there.
What do you dislike in life?
The discomfort, like just physical discomfort. Yeah.
What's the worst kind of discomfort that you know?
Well, I'm remembering a time I had the terrible stomach flu. I'm remembering a time in my childhood of, you know, my appendix ruptured when I was 10. That was pretty bad.
Hmm.
You know. So.
What about our like? What kind of? How would you say that your materialism comes to expression?
I just got a great new car.
Yeah, I think that's good. How was that for you?
That was fun.
Yeah. What kind of car did you get?
You know what I got is I got a total electric vehicle called the Hyundai Ioniq 5. It's called.
Oh man, that's a good car, man.
So nice. I've never had a car like that. You know, I've been, my previous car was a minivan. I have kids and all that kind of stuff. So like the minivan's done. It's like it's so. I mean, I did, partly it's like, I'm being a good environmentalist care in that way, but I don't know how much impact it actually has. But I still feel it feels good to do that,
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. But it's such a it's such a nice ride, and
Mm.
I plug it in at home. I mean, it's so nice. It's
Yeah,
great.
I've driven it myself. My
Oh,
my
you have?
my
Oh, this
elder
is
brother has it. Yeah, yeah, my elder brother has it, and I used to work with at a childcare facility, and they had an Ionic 5, so I used to drive that. It's a good experience.
it's a great ride.
Wow, it's a great ride, man.
Yeah.
And is electric cars getting more popular in the States now?
Yeah, I don't know how it compares to other countries, but yeah, for sure. I mean, and they've put out more. There's more. What's the word? More choices.
Yeah.
And the federal government has put out new, tax incentives or rebates, so that helps with things, and it's just all kind of going in that direction. Hopefully, more and more, and obviously, still, the vast majority of cars are gas or things like that, but. Yeah, every day you see more and more electric cars on the road, and
Hmm.
yeah,
And
I'd say nothing a material thing about the Ionic 5. The way that thing can go, like this, I didn't know that about those cars. I had no idea that they had like this crazy fast acceleration. I don't
yeah,
tend to drive that way,
yeah,
but I couldn't help myself for the first 3 weeks because I'm like, boom,
sport, yeah,
it's just crazy.
and
All the energy is right there, right in the wheel. So.
for sure. And when you put it on sport, like how it moves, oof.
Yeah.
Great experience of life, huh?
Yeah.
And I
My
know,
daughter was asking my son has I have an older son, the big age gap, and so he drives one of our older cars, and he has to get an oil change, and
yeah,
so we're taking care of that. My daughter who's very young, is like, so when do you have to get an oil change on your car? And I was like, it doesn't need an oil change. It
mm,
doesn't run on an engine. And she was like, well, how's it work? It's this great conversation about these sorts of things.
yeah, very good. And do you personally engage with newspapers, the political landscape, the events of the world, the state of the world? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I'm a big in the news, maybe a little less than I used to. More than a little, but I'm very aware of. I read a lot. I'm both like in the States, it's like the New York Times is a major one. Plenty of things online, Washington Post, NPR, and other things, and uh, I'm on Twitter, even though it's a kind of ugly place at times, but there's people who put out interesting stuff. I like to read that stuff. And periodicals, and yeah, I'm very aware. At least I'm aware through that lens. I
Yeah,
can't say I have a total view,
yeah.
but yeah.
Do you have a perspective, an opinion, a felt sense of your observation of what's happening?
Yeah, I don't have a final view or authoritative view. I'm very aware of enjoying and wanting to know. I mean, part of it's wanting to know because, I'm a citizen and I vote, and I, care about certain issues and want to know what's happening.
Yeah,
And so there's that level. Part of it is just like fascinating, and I'm wanting to know at that level. And sometimes I can be more optimistic, sometimes a little more pessimistic. Mostly, I don't know. It's like I don't know where it's going.
yeah,
And sometimes I'm viewing it more through the lens of, oh, these particular individuals are having a big impact, good or bad, right? And other times it's more the view of like, these individuals are more a part of a large system at work, like ants of a colony, and to see more of a system view of things. Like you take something like, again, I'm not an expert on these things, but like, climate change and the effect it's going to have on migration and people
yeah,
moving, having to leave their, homes to go to other places and how that affects other countries and what reactions to that. And and then reactions on reactions to that. And, living in the United States, I'm much more aware of the political, social situation here. I could never, if I go back 6, 7 years and say, well, here's the things that are going to happen in the next 7 years. Like, really?
Yeah.
And then you go through it and then you look back, it's like, oh, well, I can see the logic looking back, but I couldn't tell you where it's going. Yeah. And I care though, and I want to know and have the degrees that I can have influence. Actually, I've thought about this, a lot at different times, less so lately. But what's my role in these things?
Yeah.
And should I be doing more things? Should I be, what should I be doing to help and be useful, and what's good for me, and all these things. And for a while now, what I realize is what I'm doing is good for the whole situation to my degree, and it so happens that what I'm doing is I'm a teacher in this school, and that is good for it's good for the people that it touches, it's good for me, it benefits me when I also grow when I'm doing that stuff. That's my main work these days. I mean, we talked about my body work, the Rolfing. I still do that a little, but maybe 5% of my work life. Yeah. And then other than that, I'm a parent and a husband, and I have my hobbies and interests, and are they, part of the social fabric? Of course, absolutely. And, are they enjoyable for me? Are they good for others? Are they, net positive overall? And I don't think I won't do it if I'm just curious about it, and I can look at it. It's like, yeah, these are good things, and I enjoy them. And, so what's a good cliche? You leave the situation a little better than you found it. Not because you're trying to, but you're just, you're walking in the world in a nice way, and certainly make mistakes, and, clean them up when you can. And so it's like, oh yeah, I'm doing the things I can do, and I care about other things. And, am I going to be, changing in a big way my actions? It could happen, who knows? I mean, I don't know. It'll come in a few years. I might feel moved to take up a different action. But for now, this is the right thing.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so beautiful. It's really good to connect with you, and to both get a sense of the depth of realization, and the curiosity, the clarity, the mystery coming through, and also the humanity, and how that's such a hallmark of the Diamond Approach, in the world but not of it. So I feel that that really comes through when I listen to you.
Yeah, very much so. I'm glad you bring that view in the world, not of it view.
Yeah.
I like, I don't know why, but that phrase, in the world, it's written as in the world but not of it, and I've also heard it as in the world and not of it. And I like and more than but.
Yeah.
It's like you're both. You're in the world and you're not of it. That's not your source, and you're in it. You're living.
That is good, yeah.
Mira cómo dice cha cha cha.
Ah, the joy of dancing, huh? Mm, yeah. I mean, that music speaks for itself, huh?
Beautiful. Yeah. I remember the first time I heard that. It's great. Still beautiful.
Hmm. Hmm. In terms of your offerings, what's alive for you? I mean, I know that you work with students one to one, and is it true that you have some groups, open groups that you're teaching in?
Yeah. So I co-lead two groups that are open to new students. One is based out of Philadelphia, and one's based out of New York City. And they have slightly different formats and different teaching team. So I work with one other teacher, Gina Crago in Philadelphia, and that group meets right now 4 times a year, like 3.5 days, some usually in person, sometimes online. And the New York group I teach with Alan Whiteman and Noel Goldberg, and that meets on a weekend format, just 2 days, but 6 times a year. And when it meets in person, the Philadelphia one is at a retreat center, so we can all stay there. The New York one typically is in the city, and a little bit online still too. Yeah, so they're both lovely groups and open to new students. So I do that, and I work with individual sessions and do small groups. And I also do a lot with the Diamond Body practice, which is, this practice for movement work, for exploring the teaching of the Diamond Approach, really, to how the Diamond Approach can come through the body and also see how the body can be a vehicle for both exploring the barriers to our realization and also expressing that realization. And so I, lead that practice in different settings and also lead sort of deeper dives into it. So anyone in the school, there's some of that offered to people who are outside the school. There's the Diamond Approach Online has a Diamond Body practice video series that we put together. But if you're in the school in particular and you're wanting to do something to support your body's exploration of this path, this is a very powerful way to do that. And there's free weekly offerings online through the school. Some people's home groups have it. The free offerings online are open to anyone in the school. And then there are these little deeper dives. Some of them are like, 4 times, meet for a short period of time for over 4 weeks. Some are, what I'm teaching is a bit longer dives into it. And really to unpack the richness of the practice and to have time for people to process and explore the impact of their breath, their movement, their sensations on their current state, really. Whether that's some obstacle they're dealing with, some frustration, some rejection, some resistance, which we welcome all that in the path, or some qualities of presence and openness. So I do a good amount with that as well. I have one of those starting up soon. It's a 6 meetings, 3 hours each. That's for people who've been in the work through what's called the Pearl Teachings.
Yeah.
There are other offerings that are for anybody, in the school. So yeah, it's good stuff.
Is it through the portal people can find that, or Diamond Approach Online?
Yeah, so that's a good question. If you go to Diamond Approach Online, you'll find the offering that was put out to the public, and that's like I think we did 6 meetings of that. Linda Creer and I did that together. She's the developer of the Diamond Body practice, the primary vehicle for it coming into the school and the teaching.
Yeah.
And in terms of the other offerings, on the portal, there is a page called Affinity Groups. And so if you log into the portal, you have like My Portal and like maybe like group stuff, all school stuff. It's either under all school or it's a direct link to Affinity Groups. But under Affinity Groups, there's a Diamond Body practice page, and that lists offerings. And there's also an email you can send your name to, and you'll get added to a list, and you'll be kept up to date on the latest, series being offered, and you can also ask questions or maybe look to organize an offering if you want to have one in your home group, things like that.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, so anyone who's curious, go to Diamond Approach online or to the portal, and to simply show up, see how. Is it something that you commit to, or are there some free versions as well?
Yeah, so there are free versions that you can just show up. We call it the free Monday practice, and you can either come live. It happens at 12:30 Eastern time, so wherever that is for wherever you are in the world.
Yeah.
But we also post a recording of that. We update the recording every week, and it's set for about an hour. We do a half hour of leading the practice, and that's what's posted. And then there's usually about a 15-minute or so open discussion exploration time. We don't post that part because we don't want to have to deal with getting approvals for every person who might say something.
Yeah.
But that kind of go further unpacking the practice. So that's free.
Yeah.
And there's other things that are free online. And if you're wanting to have a bit more instruction with it, you can just email that, diamondbodypractice@gmail.com, or you can email me, and I can put you in touch with someone. Greg, my email is greg37k@gmail.com. Yeah, so it's a lot to open up there.
Wonderful. Greg, it's been wonderful to be with you. So very insightful and a very enjoyable conversation.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. My pleasure being with you, Wazee. I look forward to having more chances to connect with you, and wish you good journeys.
Wonderful. Likewise, my friend. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you be well.
Yeah.
Wish you well.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.